There's one thing the samurai knew about the human mind that neuroscience took centuries to prove. Discomfort is not the enemy. That escaping discomfort is the true enemy. Think about it for a second. You wake up in the morning. Before getting out of bed, you've already grabbed your phone. Before having coffee, you're already on the phone. At lunch, you can't eat in silence. In traffic, headphones on. In the supermarket queue, scrolling. In bed, watching a series until you fall asleep. Have you ever been alone with your thoughts for more than 2 minutes today? You, the silence, and your own head? If the answer is no, you're not alone. And the problem is bigger than it seems. Researchers at the University of Virginia conducted a simple experiment. They placed people alone in a room for 15 minutes. No cell phones, no books, nothing. Just sitting with their own thoughts. Participants could press a button that would give themselves an electric shock if they wanted. Do you know how many prefer shock to silence? 2/3. 2/3 of people preferred to experience physical pain rather than be alone with their own mind. This is the result of years of living in an environment designed to eliminate every second of discomfort, boredom, and friction from your life. And the price we're paying for that is high, very high. We give up on everything that requires time. We change our goals every Monday. We abandon relationships when they stop being easy. We quit jobs when they become difficult. We start projects that die the following week. And the worst part is, we know we're doing it. We see ourselves doing it, and we can't stop. Today you will understand the 4 concepts that the samurai used to forge warriors. Concepts that will help you endure discomfort and use it as your ally, not your enemy. These concepts are Shugyo, intentional difficulty; Kaizen, improvement every day; Kenshō, to see his own pattern clearly; Zanshin, the attention that doesn't dissipate after victory. And in the middle of this story, I'm going to tell the story of a man named Ethan. A man who lived exactly like this until the day he met a Japanese carpenter who changed everything for him. What I'm going to teach you in this video isn't how to stay motivated. It's a system. Chapter 1. The Man Who Was Seen Fleeing. Ethan Cole was 27 years old and had a problem he couldn't name. It was the feeling that he was always starting over and never arriving anywhere. He grew up in Ohio, a middle-class child with supportive parents. He never experienced real hardship. At school, teachers would write on his report card, "Intelligent, but could try harder." Always that phrase. Every year, he enrolled in marketing school because it seemed practical. He dropped out 4 years later without any conviction. He got a job at a digital agency. He switched to another agency after 8 months. He switched again after a year. He managed the social media for a medium-sized company. The work wasn't bad, it wasn't good, it was tolerable. And tolerable for Ethan had become the only category he knew. On weekends, he would start projects: a podcast about technology, an online design course, a consulting business idea, a new Instagram account to photograph the city. Every Monday, he would wake up with that specific energy of someone who is finally going to change something. Every Friday, that project had died silently, without announcement, without drama. It just stopped. And he knew. That was the detail that was eating him up inside. He wasn't unconscious, he saw himself doing it, he saw the pattern clearly, and he couldn't stop. And his cell phone was a perfect crutch for procrastination itself. There wasn't a single quiet moment in Ethan's life. Coffee line, cell phone, elevator, cell phone, bathroom, cell phone. The 3 minutes between waking up and getting out of bed, cell phone. When silence appeared by accident, for a moment of forgetfulness, a nameless anxiety rose in his chest. That feeling that he should be doing something, consuming something, connecting with something. He didn't know that anxiety had a name. I didn't know that was exactly the muscle I needed to exercise. In relationships, the pattern repeated itself with disturbing precision. The first 2 months were great. There was interest, discovery, that light-hearted energy of the beginning. But when the relationship started demanding real effort, when disagreements arose, when routine replaced novelty, Ethan's interest grew cold. There were never any fights, never any crises. He would just distance himself, respond less, be less present, until the other person gave up. Ethan called it incompatibility. He never called it by its proper name. One Sunday afternoon 3 months ago, he stared at the ceiling of his apartment for 40 minutes. He wasn't depressed. It was empty, a kind of paralysis with no clear cause. He stayed there on the ceiling for 40 minutes. He didn't know that it was the result of years of never having spent enough time with himself to discover who he was. Perhaps you know this feeling, the feeling that you're stuck in time and that you can never make progress in life. You always start something that you think is the last thing you'll ever do, but in the end, you always give up on it and the cycle repeats itself. You don't achieve anything useful. You don't achieve anything concrete, and you keep getting frustrated, repeating the cycle and feeding the thought that you are incapable, that you lack discipline, that you are not intelligent enough to build something solid. It was at that moment that something different happened. Chapter 2. The store he shouldn't have entered. 2 weeks after that Sunday, Ethan broke a chair. Nothing dramatic, the back leg simply gave way. And instead of throwing it away and buying another one online as he normally would, for some reason he couldn't quite explain, he went out to find someone to fix it. 3 streets past the apartment, there was a small carpentry shop, the kind of shop you pass by every day without noticing. No digital sign, no social media, no flashy storefront. An aged wooden door and the smell of sawdust wafting onto the sidewalk. Ethan entered with the broken chair. The man behind the workbench was about 61 years old. Japanese-American, second generation. Short, upright posture, slow and precise movements. He was working on a piece of oak with a hand plane, unhurried, without music, without a cell phone on the workbench. Itsuki Mori didn't look like a carpenter. He seemed like someone who had decided at some point in his life that he was going to do only one thing, and that he was going to do it well. Ethan set the chair down on the counter. Itsuki looked, examined the broken leg for a few seconds, and stated the price. Ethan agreed. But instead of leaving to wait for contact, Ethan stood there. He stared at Itsuki's hands, at the way he worked. There was a quality of presence there that Ethan couldn't name, but recognized as an absence within himself, as if that man were completely absorbed in what he was doing, with no part of his attention escaping elsewhere. When we stop to analyze, we notice this contrast between the older generation and the new generation. It seems that the older generation had a different presence. It seems that they are always paying attention to the moment. They are present in body, mind, and spirit. While young people are often physically present, their minds are elsewhere. Their minds are wandering between the past and the future, but they are never in the present. Ethan couldn't remember the last time he'd felt like this, completely immersed in something. "Do you teach?" he heard himself asking. Itsuki stopped with the planer. He looked at Ethan. "What do you want to learn?" "Working with your hands, doing something concrete." Itsuki returned to the play. "Teaching. Saturday, 7 in the morning." Ethan left without quite understanding what he had just done. He had just asked to work for free at a carpentry shop on weekends, exactly the kind of thing he did every time he wanted to start something new. The difference, he would soon discover, was that this time there was someone who wasn't going to let him go easily. Chapter 3. The first day and the phrase that stuck. Ethan arrived at 6:58 a.m. on Saturday. Itsuki was already there with coffee ready and an oak cutting board on the counter. "This is for you." Itsuki placed a coarse sandpaper in Ethan's hand. "Sand this surface until it's smooth." Ethan looked at the board, at the sandpaper. "Is this it?" "And that." He began with enthusiasm, the sandpaper scraping the wood, the sawdust accumulating, his arm moving at a steady pace. For the first 10 minutes, there was something almost meditative about it. 15 minutes later, the enthusiasm had vanished. The wood resisted. His arm grew tired. Progress was completely invisible. The board looked exactly the same. Ethan began to vary the angle, vary the pressure, searching for any sign that he was making progress. None. 40 minutes later, he stopped. He placed the sandpaper on the workbench. He looked at Itsuki, who was working on another piece, without having glanced in his direction even once. "I was thinking," Ethan said, "that maybe this isn't quite what I was looking for. Maybe I should try something different, like marquetry or working with power tools or, you've been here for 40 minutes. Itsuki didn't raise his eyes. It took me 3 years to learn how to sand properly. What exactly did you expect to learn today? Silence. Ethan had no answer. There was something in the sentence that wasn't judgment or sarcasm. It was simply the fact laid on the table without any embellishment. And for the first time in his adult life, someone had named his pattern with surgical precision, without drama, without speeches. Simply, you want to leave because it didn't turn out right away. Ethan picked up the sandpaper. He went back to the board. He stayed for another hour. The board still wasn't even. But he hadn't left. At the end of the day, Itsuki looked at Ethan's work for a few seconds. He didn't praise it. He didn't criticize it. Tomorrow will be better. Ethan left with sawdust in his arms and that phrase hammering away at him. What did you expect to learn today? He stayed awake thinking about it, thinking about how many projects he had abandoned at that exact point. Minutes after it began, when the initial enthusiasm faded and the real effort appeared, thinking about how many times I had called it not for me, or incompatibility, or time to try something else. That night he returned on Sunday. Itsuki hadn't said he could return on Sunday, but he was there. And the board was waiting. Here we need to pause the story for a moment, because there's something happening in Ethan's brain that needs to be explained, something that happens in all of our brains. When you feel discomfort, whether physical or emotional, the brain activates a region called the amygdala. It's an ancient structure, evolutionarily speaking. The amygdala was built for a very specific function, to detect threat and get you out of there. In caveman times, this was essential. Discomfort almost always meant real danger. Cold, hunger, predators. The automatic flight response saved lives. Back then, the system only activated when there was a real and concrete danger, and as soon as you got rid of that danger, the system relaxed. The problem is that the brain hasn't evolved along with the 21st century. Today, the amygdala fires up for everything. For the blank screen before you start writing. For the gym when you're tired. For that difficult conversation you've been avoiding. For the project that stopped being easy. The brain does not distinguish between dangerous discomfort and necessary discomfort. Treat them both as a threat. And when the threat appears, the reward system kicks in. It looks for the shortest path to relief, and today relief is just a touch away. Social media, TV series, delivery, notifications. Each one releases a small dose of dopamine. Each quick relief teaches the brain that escape works. Researcher Kent Berridge from the University of Michigan spent decades studying the dopaminergic system and discovered something counterintuitive. Dopamine is not linked to the pleasure of having something. It is linked to the desire to seek it. It's the system of wanting, not liking. And when you train this system with instant rewards, you create a loop that gets stronger with each cycle. Discomfort appears, immediate escape happens, relief arrives, the cycle repeats. The muscle of persistence, like any muscle, atrophies without use. Ethan wasn't weak. He had simply lived in an environment that never required him to exercise that muscle. Until he met Itsuki. Chapter 4. Shugyo. In the following weeks, Ethan continued to appear. On Saturdays and Sundays, 7 in the morning. The board was uniform. Then came a simple joint, then a basic box. Itsuki never made things easy. He never explained before it was necessary. He let Ethan make mistakes, redo them, make different mistakes, redo them again. And Ethan noticed something strange happening during the week. He began to notice, with a clarity he hadn't previously possessed, how often he avoided small and completely unnecessary discomforts. The headphones he put on in the subway before even sitting down, because the simple act of remaining quiet for 8 minutes already seemed unbearable. The cell phone that went into his hand during the 3-minute wait at the cafe, the series that automatically started when he should have been thinking. It wasn't a conscious decision, it was a reflex. On a Saturday in the 3rd month, Ethan broke a piece that had taken 2 sessions to prepare, a joint that had been more difficult than anything he had done before. The piece simply broke when he squeezed too hard. He threw the sandpaper on the workbench. "I wasn't made for this." Itsuki stopped. He picked up the broken piece. He examined it. He set it aside. Then, for the first time, he spoke about his own father. Itsuki's father had opened a fish shop in the little Tokyo neighborhood of Los Angeles when he arrived from Japan. He woke up at 4 in the morning every day for 41 years. Not because he loved waking up at 4, not because he thought it was beautiful, because there was work that needed to be done, and the discomfort of doing it was simply the price of the life he had chosen. And here our first concept comes in clearly. Shugyo, said Itsuki. Ethan had never heard the word. Intentional austerity. The samurai practiced Shugyo not to punish themselves, but to forge themselves. You don't run from the fire to avoid burning. You stay close enough to learn the temperature. Itsuki looked at Ethan. The discomfort isn't the problem. Your relationship with discomfort is... Itsuki looked at Ethan. The discomfort isn't the problem. Your relationship with discomfort is... What Itsuki was describing without using scientific terms has a name in neuroscience. It's called top-down threat regulation. When you voluntarily expose yourself to discomfort in a controlled and repeated way, something specific happens in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for reasoning and self-control. The prefrontal cortex begins to gain influence over the amygdala. The amygdala continues firing. The discomfort is still registered, but the prefrontal cortex, which has been trained through repeated exposure, is able to process the signal differently. Instead of threat, flee now, the message begins to be known signal I can cross. Neuroscientists call this stress tolerance, but the mechanism is the same one that the samurai called Shugyo centuries ago. There is yet another effect. When you voluntarily choose discomfort, rather than being forced into it, the brain processes the experience in a completely different way. The sense of agency, that you are making a choice, activates the reward system in a way that involuntary discomfort does not. You're not suffering, you're training, and the brain learns the difference. Chapter 5, Kaizen, the problem he didn't know he was solving. In the 4th month, Itsuki made a challenge. Choose one thing, just one. Do it for 30 days without stopping. Ethan thought about the gym, waking up earlier, and stopping looking at his phone before bed. He wanted to choose something grand, small, Itsuki said before he finished thinking. Smaller than you think is necessary. Ethan chose to write a sentence in his diary before going to sleep. Any sentence. About the day, about what he was thinking, about nothing. One sentence. It seemed ridiculous. It continued to seem ridiculous on the 2nd day, the 3rd, the 5th. On the 10th day, he realized it was the first time in his adult life that he had done the same thing for 10 days in a row. One sentence. The reaction wasn't one of celebration. It was one of shock. The muscle was more atrophied than he had imagined. By the 15th day, the writing had expanded on its own. Without conscious decision, without extra effort, the sentences turned into paragraphs. He hadn't decided to write more. The habit had created space, and the content had filled it naturally. Itsuki called this Kaizen, continuous improvement, not a one-time grand transformation. The microscopic step that, repeated every day, becomes irreversible. The Japanese use this in manufacturing, in medicine, in martial arts. It's the principle that 1% better every day isn't 1% better at the end of the year. It's 37 times better. Ethan remained silent. But it's not just about growth, Itsuki continued. It's about proving something to yourself. You don't trust yourself right now. Every project you've abandoned has broken an internal promise. Kaizen doesn't build skill first. It builds confidence. I've talked about the concept of Kaizen several times here on the channel. This concept is so important for maintaining consistency that it's always worth remembering. Because sometimes we find ourselves thinking that we need a perfect routine. If we want to start at the gym, we think we need to start training 6 times a week, training 2 hours a day. We think that if we're going to start a diet, we need to start in the most perfect way possible, but that's not actually how it works. Kaizen teaches us this and removes that weight from our minds, the idea that we need to be perfect in everything and that we need to start perfectly. That's not how it works. We need to focus on consistency, on what can be done every day. Over several weeks, months, and years, this will yield extraordinary results. I can even use the example of reading. You don't need to start by reading for an hour a day. You can start by reading 10 pages of a book a day. In 15 days, you will have read a 150-page book. In a year, you can read at least 12 books. So think about it that way. Kaizen is like that. Now back to the story. There is a very specific neurological reason for what Itsuki was describing. When you complete any task you set out to do, even a small one, the brain releases dopamine. Not a huge amount, but consistently, predictably. And the human brain is addicted to predictable rewards. MIT researcher Anne Gabriel has spent decades studying how habits form in the brain. She discovered that the basal ganglia, the region responsible for automatic behaviors, need repetition to create what she calls chunking, where a sequence of actions becomes a single automatic package. But there's a detail that most people ignore. This process needs success, not effort. When you try to do too much at once and fail, the basal ganglia don't create the habit. They create a pattern of abandonment. The brain learns that that sequence ends in failure. When you do something small and complete it every day, the basal ganglia create the opposite pattern. The sequence ends in success, and the brain starts wanting to repeat that sequence. That is neural architecture. This is what Ethan was building with one sentence a day. Chapter 6. The day he almost really left. 2 months later, Ethan was about to quit his job. It wasn't the first time, but this time there was a difference. He had sworn to himself that he wouldn't do it again. He had promised himself that he would get through the discomfort, apply what he was learning from Itsuki, and stop the pattern. And I was 2 days away from sending my resignation email. The reason was the same as always. Work had become difficult. The initial enthusiasm had faded. The boss was demanding, projects were stalled, the routine was grueling. And that familiar voice said it was time to start over somewhere else. He told Itsuki on a Saturday, not waiting for approval, maybe waiting for confirmation, or maybe waiting for someone to tell him he was wrong. Itsuki said neither of those things. He asked a question. What specifically is bothering you at work? Ethan listed them. The boss, the lack of growth, the monotonous routine, the feeling of being stuck. Did these things exist 6 months ago? Yes. And 3 months ago, when you started coming here, did they exist? Yes. So it's not the job that has changed. Silence. I want to introduce you to a concept called Kenshō, another word that Ethan had never heard before. See nature itself, not the nature of work. Your own nature, not the problem out there, the pattern within. Itsuki placed the planer on the workbench and looked directly at Ethan for the first time that day. When you leave, it's not the job you're leaving behind. It's the discomfort. And the discomfort goes with you in the next job. The first few months will be different. It will seem like it's improved. Then the discomfort returns, and you leave again. Ethan knew this story. It was the story of his life. The question isn't whether the job is good or bad. The question is, what are you running away from that's inside you, not out there? What Itsuki was describing has a name in psychology. It's called experiential avoidance. Stephen Hayes, a psychologist at the University of Nevada and creator of acceptance and commitment therapy, has spent decades studying what happens when people flee from uncomfortable internal states. The result is always the same. What you run away from grows. The act of escaping reinforces the belief that you can't handle it. Each escape tells the brain, this feeling is unbearable. And the brain learns this message. There is also a phenomenon called the rebound effect. When you actively suppress a thought or feeling, the brain activity associated with it increases. The effort of not thinking about something makes you think about it more. But there's something more specific happening with Ethan. Researchers have identified what they call the illusion of new beginnings. The human brain associates new contexts, new jobs, new cities, new relationships with the possibility of being a different person. This association releases dopamine, creating genuine optimism. The problem is that the person who goes to the new context is the same person. Internal standards don't change jobs with you. Kenshō, the concept that Itsuki presented to Ethan, is the exact opposite of the illusion of a new beginning. It is the practice of seeing one's own pattern clearly, without escape, without embellishment, without attributing the cause to external factors. It's not comfortable, it's necessary. So before making any impulsive decisions, look within yourself. Recognize your own patterns. Ask yourself if your decision is genuine or if your brain is simply trying to escape discomfort. Chapter 7. What he saw when he stopped running. Ethan did not send the resignation email because for the first time he had looked at the situation and asked the right question, and the answer he found was uncomfortable in a way unlike anything he had felt before. He realized that he wasn't stagnant at work. He himself was stagnant, and work was merely the latest reflection of that. In every project he had abandoned, in every relationship that had cooled, in every job he had changed, the pattern was identical. The external details varied. The internal structure was always the same. When the easy phase ended and the real effort began, something within him found a reason to leave. Too smart not to notice, not committed enough to change. This realization wasn't a pleasant revelation. It was more like turning on the light in a room that's been dark for a long time. You finally see what's there, but you also see all the mess that's accumulated. Kenshō is not enlightenment. It's not the peace of having understood something. It's the clarity of seeing what was there all along. Ethan stayed in the job, and in the following months he did something he had never done before. He crossed the valley. That specific period where the initial enthusiasm has faded, mastery hasn't yet arrived, and only effort remains without visible reward. He crossed because for the first time he knew what he was doing. I wasn't staying in the job because the job was good. I was staying because I was training a muscle that had spent its whole life atrophying. Chapter 8. Zanshin, the danger no one tells about. 4 months after the day he almost lost his job, Ethan was different. He completed projects. He had difficult conversations that he had previously avoided. He slept without his cell phone in the bedroom. When silence fell, instead of running away, he stayed. It wasn't comfortable, but it was bearable, and it was becoming more bearable each week. One Saturday afternoon, he looked at the box he had built over the past 3 weeks. It was the most laborious piece he had ever made. Perfect joints, a uniform surface, a finish that had required more patience than anything else in his adult life. At that moment he felt the pride of having done something that demanded a lot from him and that he hadn't given up on. He told Itsuki. He hoped he would smile. Itsuki stared at the box for a few seconds. Then he looked at Ethan. Zanshin? One more word, said Ethan, half smiling. The last one, and the most important one. Itsuki placed the planer on the workbench. Zanshin is the attention that remains after the act. In the art of Japanese archery, the archer does not lower the bow when releasing the arrow. He maintains his posture, focus, and tension until the arrow reaches the target. The archer who relaxes before the target is already lost, even if the arrow arrives. He looked at the box. You're doing well now, more stable than when you arrived. You've built something real in the last few months, and that's precisely the most dangerous time. Ethan didn't understand immediately. He understood the following week. He spent an entire weekend without going to the carpentry shop. No intention, no decision. He simply didn't go. And at the end of Sunday, he realized he'd spent more time on his phone than on any weekend in the last 4 months. He'd skipped his diary. He'd avoided a conversation he needed to have with a coworker. The muscle he had painstakingly built had begun to soften within 72 hours. He went back to the carpentry shop on Monday morning. You understood, said Itsuki, without Ethan needing to say anything. There is a neurological phenomenon that most people don't know. It's called reverse neuroplasticity, the same mechanism that allows the brain to adapt to repeated effort, forming stronger connections, also breaks down those connections when the behavior stops. Use it or lose it is not a metaphor, it's physiology. Neuroscientist Michael Merzenich, a pioneer in the study of brain plasticity, has demonstrated that neural connections that are not used regularly weaken at a surprising rate. In some cases, days of inactivity are enough to reduce the efficiency of a circuit that took weeks to build. But there is yet another specific effect of success. When you achieve a goal, the dopaminergic system undergoes a process called desensitization. The basal dopamine level rises temporarily after a significant achievement, and then the system requires greater stimuli to produce the same response. In practical terms, after a victory, the discomfort of maintaining the same level of effort seems greater than before. Not because you became weaker, but because the reward system recalibrated. This explains why so many people who achieve a major goal, whether it's weight, career, or academic achievement, regress soon after. It's biochemistry. Zanshin is the only answer the samurai found for this problem. Don't celebrate the end. Maintain your posture after the arrow. Anders Ericsson, the Swedish psychologist who dedicated his life to studying expertise training, made a discovery about talent. In decades of researching musicians, athletes, chess players, and surgeons, he discovered that the difference between the world's best and the very good was not innate talent. It was what he called deliberate practice, systematic exposure to the specific discomfort of each skill over long periods, with constant feedback. Growth, he wrote, only happens in the discomfort zone, not beyond it. The zone where there is overload, not short of the zone where there is comfort, right on the edge. The samurai didn't know Ericsson's terminology, but they described the same principle centuries earlier. They called it Shugyo. Andrew Huberman explains the relationship between boredom and creativity in a way that explains much of what is happening with the current generation. The brain's default mode, the one that activates when you're not doing anything specific, is where deep processing, memory integration, and the generation of new ideas take place. When you're never bored, when every moment of non-stimulus is immediately filled, you never enter that mode. You never let the brain do the work it can only do when it's free. Chapter 9. 6 months later. Ethan has completed 6 months in the carpentry workshop. He hadn't abandoned any of the projects he had started during that period. He had finished the writing he had begun, 1 sentence a day. He had had the difficult conversation with his boss that he had avoided for months. He had stayed in a relationship that had gone through a 3-month crisis for the first time in his adult life. It hadn't gotten easy. It had never gotten easy. But it had become different. The discomfort hadn't disappeared. The anxiety of the silence still lingered. The urge to change the subject, the project, the path, still hit hard at times. But he had learned the difference between the signal of discomfort and the response to discomfort. The signal would always arrive. The answer was a choice. One Saturday afternoon, while they were working in silence, Ethan asked, "Why did you stay with the carpentry shop?" Itsuki continued in the play for a few seconds. "My father once told me, 'Itsuki, anyone can do something when it's easy. A person's character is made of what that person does when it's difficult.'" He stopped. "I stayed with carpentry because I learned that I am made of what I do when it's difficult, and I wanted to know who I was." Ethan spent some time thinking about that phrase. I wanted to know who it was. And he realized that this was exactly the question he had spent his life avoiding asking. Because to know who you are, you need to be quiet long enough to hear the answer. And being quiet is uncomfortable. And he had filled every possible second of silence to avoid having to hear it. The cell phone wasn't entertainment, it was anesthesia. The constant switching of projects wasn't out of curiosity. It was an escape from the moment when a project demands that you confront your own limitations. The premature exit from relationships wasn't incompatibility. It was a refusal to be seen up close long enough for someone to discover that he didn't know who he was. Everything had been unconsciously constructed so that I would never have to stay there. With the silence, with the boredom, with the discomfort of being a person under construction. What Itsuki had taught was not carpentry. It was like staying. Ethan is 29 years old today, 2 years after that first Saturday. He didn't become a different person. He didn't wake up one day different, transformed, without his old impulses. The urge to flee still appears. The amygdala still fires. The dopaminergic system still looks for the shortest shortcut. The difference is that he built, brick by brick, the ability to observe that impulse without obeying it. And do you know what happened with that? Not just in projects and jobs. In everything, he started sleeping better because he stopped running away from the thoughts that came to him when he went to bed. He started having deeper conversations because he stopped changing the subject when the topic got heavy. He began to feel for the first time that there was a version of himself that he was intentionally building, instead of a version that happened by default. Identity is not what you are. It's what you consistently do, especially when it's difficult. But there's something even more interesting. The tolerance for discomfort that Ethan built with Shugyo, Kaizen, Kenshō, and Zanshin wasn't limited to just the carpentry workshop. This tolerance was transferred to work, to relationships, to health, because there is only one muscle. When you train your ability to overcome discomfort in any area, you are training the ability in general. The brain doesn't compartmentalize this skill. It is available wherever you need it. Samurai didn't practice Shugyo to become good at Shugyo. They practiced to become good at everything. The world today was deliberately designed to eliminate every second of friction, waiting, and discomfort from your life. This is not weakness on your part. It's engineering. And the predictable result of this engineering is a generation that has lost the ability to get through anything that takes more than 40 minutes to show results. The samurai, centuries before neuroscience, identified 4 principles that address this problem. Shugyo, intentional discomfort. Don't run away from what is difficult. Actively seek resistance because it is what forges character. Neuroscience confirms repeated exposure to controlled discomfort trains the prefrontal cortex to regulate the amygdala. You don't become fearless. You become more capable of acting despite fear. Kaizen, the 1% improvement. Not a heroic transformation, but a microscopic step repeated every day. Neuroscience confirms small, consistent victories create a successful neural architecture. The basal ganglia learn that this sequence ends in completion, not abandonment. Kenshō, seeing one's own nature, stopping attributing internal patterns to external factors. The courage to honestly examine one's own behavior and ask, what am I running away from that is within me, not outside? Neuroscience confirms experiential avoidance amplifies what you avoid. Seeing the pattern clearly is the only way to have the option to change. Zanshin, the attention that doesn't relax. Don't abandon your posture after achieving your goal. Understand that identity is not destiny, it's maintenance. Neuroscience confirms reverse neuroplasticity is real. What you stop doing, the brain undoes. What sustains growth is not the effort of building, but the discipline of continuing. And the most important thing Ethan's story teaches us is, the problem was never a weakness of character. It was a muscle that was never used. And muscle, like any muscle, responds to training. You don't need to become a samurai. You don't need 41 years of carpentry experience. You need a first step small enough that you have no excuse not to take it. What discomfort will you stop running away from starting today? If you've made it this far, this video has touched you in some way. And I want to know how. Comment below. Which of the 4 concepts makes the most sense to you right now? Shugyo, Kaizen, Kenshō, or Zanshin? And what's the first small thing? A really small thing that you're going to do differently this week? These stories of real change that you send me are what keep me creating this content. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do it now. Every week there's a new video bringing Japanese wisdom applied to real life, work, relationships, and your mind. And if this video taught you something, I invite you to watch the one that is appearing on your screen now. You will certainly gain an excellent understanding from it. Thank you very much for your time, for your perspective, for your attention. Be present. Walk with honor. Follow the path until the next video.